It is recounted in history books that the Abbasid Caliph Abu Jaafar al-Mansur was one of the most frugal rulers when it came to money. Unlike other caliphs, he did not have the same inclination to lavishly distribute wealth and gifts to poets. On the contrary, he was known for his seriousness in managing the state's resources, to the extent that he could be accused of stinginess if that point was raised. However, despite his frugality, he was smart enough to realize that being accused of stinginess would affect his reputation. Therefore, he decided to resort to a unique trick that leveraged one of his greatest talents, his ability to memorize poems quickly. Al-Mansur could memorize any poem recited to him the first time, while his servant would memorize it after hearing it twice, and his maid needed 3 times to master it. Al-Mansur announced an enticing prize for poets. Anyone who could present him with a poem he had never heard before would receive its weight in gold. Thus, hoping to avoid suspicion, he trapped the poets in an inescapable snare. Poets flocked to the Caliph's palace carrying their self-written poems. But Al-Mansur, after listening to them, would surprise them by saying that he had heard the poem before. He would then recite it himself, call his servant to repeat it, and sometimes the maid would also confirm hearing it. Thus, the poets left empty-handed, without receiving any reward. This trick continued until the news reached a wise and sharp-witted poet, Abd al-Malik ibn Quraib, known as Al-Asma'i. Al-Asma'i realized that there was some trick involved and decided to disguise himself as a Bedouin, covering his face to avoid suspicion, and presented a strange and unique poem. Al-Asma'i entered the Caliph's palace and recited his innovative poem, which was filled with unusual words and strange style. The sound of the sparrow's whistle stirred the heart of the drunk. Water and flowers together with the blossom of the eye's gaze, and you, my master, and my lord, my protector. How many times have I yearned for the gazelle of a keek? I plucked it from a cheek. From the blush of shy roses he said, "No, no, no, no." And he walked away hastily, and the helmets tilted joyfully. From the actions of this man she wailed and wailed. "Alas, alas, woe is me," I said. "Do not wail, show me the pearls." She said to him at that time, "Rise and be generous." And the young men served me coffee like honey. I smelled it with my nose, more fragrant than cloves, in the midst of a garden adorned with flowers and joy for me. The oud played for me, and the drum drummed for me. Drum, 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 drum. And the dance was pleasing to me, grilled and grilled and grilled on quince leaves, and the turtle doves sang boredom in boredom. If you saw me riding on a thin donkey, walking on 3 legs like the gait of a crippled man, and people throwing stones at my camel in the market with clamor, and everyone shouted behind me and from every side, but I walked away swiftly from the fear of the owl to meet a great king glorified and honored. He ordered me a robe, red like blood. I walked in it, swaggering with the tale, "I am the brilliant poet." From the land of Mosul I composed adorned pieces that baffle the scholar. I say at the beginning, the sound of the sparrow's whistle. The Caliph listened attentively to the poem and found it difficult to recall its details, which forced him to admit that he had never heard it before. Thus he was obliged to pay its weight in gold. However, the Caliph, who expected the poet to have written his poem on paper, was astonished when Al-Asma'i revealed a marble pillar with the poem inscribed on it, which was carried by 20 soldiers on a camel. When the pillar was weighed, it equaled a massive chest full of gold. But the Caliph's minister, who knew Al-Asma'i well, discovered the trick and said, "O Commander of the Faithful, I believe it is Al-Asma'i." The Caliph then asked the Bedouin to remove his disguise, and found that it was indeed Al-Asma'i. The Caliph reproached Al-Asma'i, saying, "Would you do this to the Commander of the Faithful? Return the money immediately." Al-Asma'i calmly replied, "O commander of the faithful, you have cut off the poet's livelihood with this trick. I will only return the money on one condition, that you resume rewarding the poets for their words and compositions." The Caliph conceded to the condition and returned to awarding the poets as his predecessors had done after being embarrassed by al-Asma'i and forced to abandon his trick.